Hey, everybody. I'm Glenn Crooks. There's Matty Lawrence. We're back with another NYCFC coffee break, episode 4 of we don't know how many, but we'll try. Sorry, Matty. I already know next Monday I can't do it. We'll have to switch to Tuesday, but we'll make that clear. But that's the way this sort of podcast, this freewheeling goes sometimes. And how you doing?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Glenn. And yet, Monday or Tuesday of next week's good with me. I think you said you're coming back from your sister's house, so family's more important than anything. So absolutely. And on Tuesday, yes, we can reconvene at 10, 11 o'clock, whenever everybody wants. But yes, I'll be available on Tuesday. Because I love this, Glenn. I love this going back over the weekend and specifically, obviously, NYCFC. It makes me feel like a player again, revisiting the tape and working out what went wrong with the game, what went wrong with the goals. And I've just analysed both the goals sort of in my own head now. And look, it's a shame that NYCFC lost, but when you lose, you can draw conclusions about why that happened and work out the problems so that hopefully they don't happen again. And this is just me speaking into the ether. I'm not speaking for the players or for the coaches, but, you know, if I can see what went wrong, then I'm sure the coaches can see what went wrong as well.
Well, the thing about next week is you have an extra 24 hours now to evaluate evaluate the tape. Well, we're going to see some of that and hear Pascal Jansson's post-game comments. Pascal, by the way, today is having a presser at 1:45. This is Monday live, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern, and that's ahead of this U.S. Open Cup match. So we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So later in the day, if there's anything significant from that presser, I'll certainly post it on social media as well. A little bit later on, Matty, I know this is NYCFC coffee break, but we stray from just New York City.
Yes.
We're going to see some other MLS games, but we're also going to talk about Arsenal. And I just got off the phone or off the Zoom with a renowned sports psychologist named Dan Abrahams, who's in my book, which you kindly read.
I've read.
And he's excellent. And he's worked with Premier League players and coaches and teams, but he's also a former golf pro. So I also asked him about Rory McIlroy and what he was going through after having this massive, somewhat insurmountable lead, if you listen to the pundits, and then he's trailing, and then he comes back and wins. And did you get to watch any of the golf yesterday?
I did. I watched bits of yesterday, but also I watched quite a bit of Rory's round that blew up, if you will. And what was he, 1 over par? And that's blowing up. That's having an absolute disaster by their very high standards. As you know, I play golf, Glenn, nowhere near as well as yourself or as them. But I do understand that psychology of it, and it's just you. I know your caddy's there as well, but it really is a mind game of a sport, that's for sure. And I was astounded that he managed to right the ship and come into that last hole. I watched the last hole, come into the last hole with 2 shots to play with. He even managed to drive it off under the trees and recover very, very well. Then the bunker, the chip from the bunker as well. So to do that it's not miraculous, but it shows you what a strong mentality you've got. And I love to hear what Dan's got to say, because he's one of the guys and girls in your books that I took a lot from the psychology of a sportsman and sportswoman.
Yeah, and now the Rory part we're not going to hear today on Coffee Break. So that's a Sirius XM-FC interview in its entirety, which will air tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern, and you have to be a Sirius XM subscriber. But what I'll do is I'll pick out more clips that we can play in the future, because since we both enjoy golf, it's wonderful to hear that perspective. But just before we move on to Vancouver and New York City, I drew something from an astronaut, not one of the Artemis 2, but I tied it all together. Artemis 2, Arsenal, and Rory. I thought it was because, and it was, my mind was really just driving around. I was like, man, I need to tie some of this in, because there's so much psychology involved with all of this. And I thought, I got to call Dan. But the power of negative thinking is a chapter in a book recently written by an astronaut named Chris Hadfield. He's not one of the 4 astronauts on this Artemis 2. So we get into that a little bit in the interview too. I'll play clips along the way. But today we're just going to focus on what Dan would do if
Yeah.
he were at Arsenal right now. So that's a little bit later on in the program, because man, oh man, the supporters in particular are not sure which way to turn. Now, the New York City supporters, I don't know how they feel after these last 3 matches. We do know that all of them had goals that came from a bit of a similar way of neglect, if you will, or lack of urgency. And Pascal's going to talk about that, and this will be from his post-game comments. But a loss to Inter Miami at home where you were up 2-1. A loss to St. Louis, a tie. It felt like a loss. I keep calling it a loss. A tie to St. Louis City where you're up a goal in stoppage time and they get a point, St. Louis. And then this one at Vancouver, where it was certainly more of a dominant performance than either of the other two. So 1 point from the last 3 matches. And after the final whistle, that was something that you kind of brought up. But it's 2 MLS Cup finalists.
Yes.
Losing at Vancouver should not be considered disastrous. But what in general do you think now after contemplating a little bit more?
That point is the one that just sprung to mind. Yes, look, the last 3 games have been disastrous in terms of results, because 1 point picked up out of 9 with 2 home games is nowhere near good enough for a team of the quality of NYCFC. But the caveat is that they lost to Inter Miami and they lost to Vancouver, the 2 best teams probably in the East and the West. So you can almost paper over that. If it wasn't for the fact, Glenn, and as you said, the times you're conceding goals and the manner with which you conceded goals, Vancouver were very much the better team, and there's nothing wrong with losing away at Vancouver on that, terrible AstroTurf that we discussed in commentary, Glenn, that is 4 years old. It will be ripped up very soon for the World Cup, as we know anyway, but it's come to the end of its shelf life. I think the worry for Pascal, on top of the lack of points, is the manner with which they conceded those goals and the timings of them. It's not just conceding goals late on in games, it's also conceding them just before half-time,
right,
or starting games badly. The start against Vancouver at the weekend was not good enough. NYCFC started with kickoff. They started with possession of the ball. They gave up possession of the ball within 6 seconds because they kicked it straight out of play. And then on the 55th second mark, Brian White should have scored at the other end of the field without an NYCFC player touching the ball. So you've had kickoff, you've given the ball away, you've not touched it, and Brian White should put Vancouver 1-0 up at the other end. That for me, the tone of the game is set at the very, very beginning. And that's what happened. And from there, it didn't get much better, Glenn. And I know there was some periods in the second half where NYCFC were dominant, but that's natural that Vancouver are going to sit back a little bit. It's natural that a good team like NYCFC are going to have a certain amount of the play, right, of the ball, and going to create a few chances.
Right.
But I've looked back at the highlights twice now, and they're, one of the highlights was Nico Fernandez-Macau whacking the ball over the crossbar from 19 yards from the free kick that never had a chance of going anywhere near the goal. And that was one of the positives for NYCFC. So there's not much there.
The first shot on goal wasn't until stoppage time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that kind of tells the story a little bit too. All right, let's look at you talked about a goal right before halftime. Well, here it is. And this is how we described it. And then we'll get into Pascal's post game and do a little bit more on this goal and others that have been conceded recently.
From Berhalter, here it comes, curling towards the back post. Here's the shot, and there's the goal. The foul by Tavon Gray after his throw-in was dispossessed. It was a frustration foul by Gray. Sebastian Berhalter with his 5th assist of the season, his 9th goal contribution to lead MLS, and it's Laporta finishing on the back post side, and New York City couldn't escape. And it's really been an unfortunate half, or end of the half in particular, for New York City.
Well, it's just a terrible goal to give away. It can't happen. Laporta volleys the ball into the back of the goal from 5 yards out. Freeze can't really come for it, I don't think, because it's just chipped over the back line. but the ball is on a plane. It's following Raul Gustavo, and he doesn't quite duck underneath it, but he might as well do. And the ball it's a free effort 5 yards out, Glenn, time and time again in this first half.
Yeah, the Gustavo thing I didn't see initially, even though in commentary, that's from our NYCFC radio network commentary, which you can sync up with the Apple television on the road. You have to do that manually, but home matches like the one coming up against Charlotte, there's a drop-down app. If you're watching the game outside of the stadium, you can use this drop-down app to hear our hometown commentary for New York City FC. But I hadn't really focused on Gustavo. I just thought it was just a perfect delivery, which in essence it was, but Gustavo didn't seem to elevate or go vertical with his leap. That's the part that was puzzling in looking back at it.
Yeah, obviously Gustavo knows more than we do because he's a lot closer, but looking at that camera angle, it looks as though, yes, if he rises properly, if he truly attacks the ball, he can at a bare minimum just get a flick on and nod it over Laborda and Müller as well, who's coming in behind as well. Let's not forget Müller's right there too. If Laborda misses it, Müller volleys it in. And next to Gustavo is Truin and Tavon Gray. You've got 3/4 of the back line, 75% of the back four are all in a line, and 2 Vancouver players are ahead of them because when the ball is kicked, after the ball's kicked, you can't be offside. They've just run in behind the defence and either one of them could have tapped it home. Laborda does. I repeat that frees cannot come for that. I know that it's probably not even 5 yards. It might only be 4 yards out, but because it's just been definitely flicked or chipped over the back line, I don't think he can come for that, Glenn. Goalkeepers may be able to tell me different.
Remember I said before the play, and you've said it before too, and one of the reasons I was curious about the foul. I think we had a difference of opinion. You thought it was maybe a good foul by
I did at the time.
Yeah, and I thought it was out of frustration because he just ran up and just clipped to I can't remember who he tackled, but that corridor of uncertainty from that angle in front of the keeper and behind the defense, it's very difficult for the keeper to judge, and especially with someone like Berhalter, who one of the reasons he is going to be strongly considered for the U.S. men's national team is his ability to deliver on set pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. And there wasn't masses of pace on it. There wasn't masses of curl, but I do think it's too hard for frees to come for that. You've got 3/4 of your back line there, but none of them attacking the ball. I don't understand it, Glenn. I understand that it's zonal marking, but also a zone doesn't score a goal. A ball doesn't score a goal. The player scores the goal. Why is everybody's eyes focused on the ball and their zone and nobody focused on the 2 men, Laborda and Müller, just running in behind? It beggars belief, it really does, that nobody's got I say it time and time again, a forearm across the chest of the runner. You can run with them, put a forearm across their chest. It's not a foul. Physical contact is allowed and stop the run. But it seems now that people understand that the zone is purely a zone for NYCFC. And if you just put yourself in between the zones, you can just run in completely unopposed because nobody's going to lock onto you. So it makes it very, very difficult, Glenn, moving forward to see how that's going to be rectified without you changing. Something's got to change. You've got to mark the man to a certain degree, even if you're marking a zone. Because as I say, a zone doesn't score a goal.
Well, Ahmed thought it was just a superior cross.
It was a great cross.
Yeah,
no, it was a great cross, but with anything, there are ways to stop things. There's no such a thing as a cross that's perfect enough not to stop it. It was just a ball flighted over the back line. I agree with Ahmed. It was a great cross, yes, but why is somebody not attacking the ball like Vancouver attacked the ball? It's you've got to defend for your life.
This defending of crosses, and I'm calling crosses dead ball and run of play crosses, was addressed by Pascal Janssen after the game. And again, this is after the 2-0 loss at Vancouver.
I think it's not just a trend conceding late in the first half or in the second half. It's more looking how we concede these moments. I think the message was very clear based on what happened with the 3rd goal against Miami and what happened last week against St. Louis, that the defensive urgency and intensity has to be locked in until the whistle goes. And if you look back, for instance, at the first goal that we can see today, it's from our own throw-in, and we conceded a free kick from this moment, and we knew exactly what was going to happen, and we didn't show the urgency, the intensity in that moment to defend that set piece, and that's when you get punished against a good side like Vancouver is. It has our attention because it's something that has happened now in 3 games in a similar way, and we have to do better, and that message is very clear for us.
Man, the last time I put intensity as an issue up on social media was with the U.S. men, and they got about 200,000 views, and this is not going to get as many, but it's always disturbing to hear that urgency and intensity is an issue. And I know we're all human. I know you can't play with the same sort of urgency and intensity every game as an individual. It's probably not humanly possible. Yet, it was addressed pregame based on 2 other matches, the previous 2, and it still happens. And it's at the death of half where, if anything, you're going to sacrifice even more at that point, aren't you?
You should do. Look, the positive for NYCFC is that at least it's only urgency and intensity in certain occasions. Normally crosses coming into the box, urgency to stop the cross, urgency. Because the US men's national team, we were talking about urgency all over the field, which is a big problem. NYCFC doesn't have that problem, but it's still a big problem if the same thing keeps happening time and time again. It's happened in 3 games on the bounce, 3 games on the spin, however you want to word it. It can't happen, Glenn, because you're a fool. If you don't learn from your mistakes, you're foolish. You're naive. You're not professional enough. And Pascal said it. It did. It came from the throw-in between Keaton Parks and Tavon Gray that the Berhalter free kick happens. There can't be an urgency to stop the cross when it's from a free kick because you've got to stand 10 yards away, so it's going to be unopposed. But there has to be an urgency in attacking the ball as it comes into the penalty area. And I thought against Vancouver, time and time again, it happened, especially in the first half. Vancouver were first to every ball delivered into the penalty area. Brian White had 2 headers. That Laborda effort, and that's 3 just off the top of my head.
Remember, Thomas Muller had the free volley,
the free volley as well from the set piece. So yes, that is problematic. There is no problem with the intensity overall of NYCFC, but at certain times of the game and in certain actions, when the ball goes wide, whether it's from corner kicks or free kicks, and stopping crosses. And there has been a big lack of, I won't say intensity, I would say there's a huge lack of urgency in stopping crosses, Glenn. And that's a massive, massive problem. The second goal was a huge problem with not stopping the cross as well. I know we don't have the clip of that, Glenn.
Describe it. Describe that.
I know it's a little bit different because it's coming at the death of a game where you're 1-0 down, so you're flooding bodies forward. And if you give up a counter-attack goal, so be it. But this wasn't. And it's Caicedo, the left winger, who's come on. And he's only come on for the last 10 or 15 minutes. But it's the first time I have ever seen Tavon Gray scared to death by the pace and the quality of an opposition winger. Because
say that again, because you said that in commentary, and it almost startled me in its reality, in its truth, because Tavon has prided himself against Chucky Lozano and all those different types.
Wilfried Zaha.
And all those kind of guys, he just digs in and usually wins the battle. So why Caicedo?
Because Caicedo got the better of him straight away. The minute Caicedo came on the pitch, he did a little step over and he drove to the byline. But if you remember, Caicedo then dribbled it over the byline. He got it all wrong. He accidentally had an extra touch.
Yeah.
But that piqued Tavon Gray's interest. So he concentrated more the next time. But no, the next time he once again drove to the byline, Caicedo, and he cut it back and they could have scored. So Tavon Gray's now scared to death, and maybe that's a little bit melodramatic, but he is, and he proves it for the third goal because he just stands off. And Tavon Gray doesn't stand off. Tavon Gray's one of the best one-on-one defenders in the league. That's why I'm saying he got scared straight away. And so he lets Caicedo cut inside him this time because he stands so far off. He doesn't show him the line. He doesn't want to show him the line. So he stands too square and lets Caicedo dictate where he wants to go. And Caicedo thinks, this time I'll cut inside. Keaton Parks does him no favours by standing still and offering no defensive support. And so that's where the goal comes. Caicedo just clips it into the box for that goal. So, it's the first time, and there's nothing wrong with it happening sometimes. He got scared, Tavon, and he proved it with the way he defended for the goal, for the cross, for the second goal.
Well, it's the third out of the 9 conceded this year by New York City that have occurred from the 87th minute onward. Matt Freese had a season-high 8 saves, and he probably helped his cause because he was very good. And it was not at fault of either of the goals, unless, and I have to be fair because I've said the same thing about Matt Turner, unless he could have organized the people in front of him better somehow through demands or verbal, some sort of verbal communication. That's the kind of stuff that's kind of nuanced, and you don't really know unless you're down there.
Yeah, of course, we're not party to it, but yes, the goalkeeper's facing the whole of play. But I think from set pieces, everybody knows jobs. Everybody should know your job from set pieces. I don't think that's down to Matt. Maybe from the cross a little bit, but again, things happen so quickly. I think it would be very, very hard to blame a guy at times. Of course, the goalkeeper does have. I used to love playing behind vocal goalkeepers, the ones who would organise you, could talk you through the whole game because they see everything. And quite often they're not involved in play, so they can focus fully on what's going on in front of the defenders. But I think the speed of the manner of the second goal as well, I think it would have been difficult for Freese to have any type of impact on it. And certainly, look, Matt Freese won't be happy that he had a good game because he just lost 2-0. But some of his saves, certainly the one diving down low to his right from Brian White when he turned and spun, was really a top draw save. And yes, he's done himself no harm in that game, even though he'll be unhappy because the team lost, of course. And he's a team man, a team player.
Two other guys who were in camp with Matt Freese, Matt Turner and Chris Brady, both recorded clean sheets. Second consecutive clean sheets for both of them. We'll get to those games in a little bit just to describe and see where the Eastern Conference standings are. But how about all of a sudden this guy emerged, Malachi Jones, playing for the first time in a very, very long time. Let's just listen to our commentary. It's mostly me, Matty. It's brief.
No, that's good.
It was a nice moment. It was a nice moment.
And look who's on the field, ladies and gentlemen. This is fun. It's Malachi Jones. So Malachi Jones for New York City FC. This is his first appearance since June 28th, 2024 against Orlando City. He started that game, left after 23 minutes with a very severe double fracture in a collision with the Orlando City goalkeeper. That was 652 days ago. 1 year, 41 weeks, and 1 day. And he's back on the pitch competing.
It's just great to see him back.
All right, I got you in there at the end.
But, Thank you.
It was great to see him back. Hey,
no, it was great.
Something I thought about later, Matty, which I don't think either one of us really addressed, is he must be fit to the point where you would play him on that poor artificial surface, you know?
Yeah, I saw you mention that in our rundown, Glenn, and it's an incredibly valid point because you wouldn't risk it unless you were, I was going to say 100% confident, but nobody can be 100%. Unless you're 99.9% confident that he is 100% fit, you wouldn't risk him because that AstroTurf isn't great. If you fall on a leg or an ankle, there isn't the give that there is of grass. Extra injuries do occur on AstroTurf. So yes, it's great to see him back and performing on that surface, Glenn. You're absolutely right, because it shows that the medical team have got full confidence in him. And of course, for the young man himself, 22 months out, Glenn, nigh on 2 years. It's a crying shame because he just learned how to become a professional footballer. He just learned how to have a truly positive effect on games in the 2 or 3 months before the injury, in my opinion. He was really growing into being a professional footballer because it takes some getting used to after coming from the collegiate system. And so we were seeing the best of him. Now, of course, we hope to see the best of him again, Glenn, but it will be, you would have thought, it's been a long road to recovery, 22 months to get out on the pitch. But it's going to be maybe not as long, but it's going to be a long road to recovery of getting match fitness. Because I mentioned it commentary yesterday. After about 5 minutes, you could see he was absolutely shattered. Yeah. But you can do as much fitness work as you want off the feet, on the training ground. But you just cannot replicate match fitness and match day situations. So to see him back, yes, it was magnificent. And let's hope that he now has a run of minutes in games. And, of course, hopefully gets extra minutes tomorrow night, for instance, in the US Open Cup and in games that maybe aren't as important and maybe some NYCFC 2 games as well. Who knows?
Yeah, it's And if he can get his pace back, and that's a big part of
Yeah.
his, but just imagine how you can, it's another weapon. If he and Ojeda are on the field together on either side,
Yeah.
now you can really get in behind. You can't with Hannes Wolf. They try with Ojeda, but that's just really one side of the field that you're attacking into space with delivery. If you could have Malachi Jones also contributing, right now it's going to be off the bench in an MLS match. It gives you that added weapon, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, it certainly does. Will that pace returns? Only time will tell. It's very rare that the pace maybe not very rare, but it's a stretch to think that the pace will completely return. It might be a modicum slower, but look, that's his game. Malachi Jones is all about pace, and he did have that willingness to run in behind in those latter games just before he got injured. As I say, truly learnt that his pace could destroy defense. It doesn't matter how good a defender you are, at what level. If you've got blistering pace, you can destroy anybody if you time the runs properly and you get in behind and the delivery is spot on as well. So I look forward to seeing that twin attack that you say of Ojeda and Malachi Jones.
All right. So New York City, well, we should first say that Vancouver, by virtue of that win, is now at the top of the Supporters Shield table. So not only did they move past LAFC that suffered their first loss of the season, but they moved into the number one position in the overall rankings. New York City started the day second in the East. They're now fourth with a 3-2-2 record. Miami is third. The Chicago Fire, after blanking Atlanta 1-0, are in second place at 4-2-1 to Nashville, top of the table, 16 points to the 13 for Chicago. But Chris Brady mentioned it earlier, second straight shutout for the Chicago Fire. I don't want to say they've snuck up on the competitors, but I think they've snuck up a little bit here.
Yeah, they have. And I think we all knew that Berhalter would get things right at Chicago Fire.
Yeah.
I don't think he will be happy with the way things went last season, Glenn, because of the amount of goals they conceded. And that is not something that Greg Berhalter prides himself on, conceding too many goals. And they did that. And they've got the daunting presence of Jack Elliott there, Brady in goal, as you say. I think that they will be stronger this season than last season. And hopefully for Greg Berhalter and the defence, they don't concede as many goals. I don't have it in front of me, but statistically they were, I think it was something like 1 3/4 goals per game they conceded last season, if not closer to 2, which is not good enough. They scored
a lot. They were better on the road than at Soldier Field.
Yeah.
They scored a ton of goals, but they also conceded a boatload. Well, they have a guy at the back that I can't wait for you to see if you haven't watched him closely. And he's one of the young players in the league. He is 19 years old. Bekazeli Bogazi, and I'm forgetting his nationality, and he's just back from international duty. But he has played over 600 minutes at the back, and he is the most mature young teenage center back that I've ever seen in terms of how he, just conducts all the business back there, realizing this is MLS and there are some teen central defenders in Europe as well. But, they also, you mentioned Elliott, but this kid is a huge part of the fact that they're conceding less as well.
Yeah, with younger players and specifically defenders, it's always got to be about consistency. Can you have the longevity of a season mentally and physically, of course, as well? I haven't seen a great deal of him. But if you're performing as a centre half at a good level, which MLS is, as a teenager, you're doing something incredibly right, Glenn, because defenders mature and they mature a little bit later as well. I would say that, central defenders peak 28, 29, 30. So he's got another decade before he truly peaks, Glenn, of learning the game and learning positional play. So I cannot wait to see him. And they've only lost... they haven't lost too many games now. They
just two. And this guy, he's Bolkazi is South African, just confirming. I had to look it up. And he was also the man of the match in this Fire shutout of Atlanta United, for what it's worth.
And however poor Atlanta United have been this season and last season, of course, they've got top quality centre forwards and forwards. Almiron, Latte Lath, they've got some really good players. So they're not easy to keep out. So yes, fair play to him. But again, it does help him having Jack Elliott alongside him, who's a natural talker and a natural leader and a very experienced player in MLS. And Jack Elliott himself was a young player and growing up at Philadelphia after college, of course, alongside the likes of Glesnes. And he would have been led. He would have been led and guided by players alongside him. So now it's up to him to take on that mantle of the true leader of the defenders. So, yeah, fair play.
Yeah, and you mentioned Almiron. It was his 100th MLS appearance, but he couldn't celebrate it since Atlanta failed to score a goal. And if we look at where Atlanta United is in the table, they are 12th with just one win in 7 matches. So Tata Martino still trying to sort things out in his first year back, winning MLS Cup with them in 2018. So it hasn't gone well there. It didn't go well for Ronnie Dyla, and it hasn't gone well for Tata in his return.
And they're two, and I know Tata Martino's only just started, but he's an experienced manager. You would expect him to have an effect, or positive effect, and he hasn't had one. So that tends me to believe that there's a bigger malaise running through the club. It's not just about the coaching staff. It's not just about the players. It's about an overall, melancholy that's taking over that club at the moment. It has to be, Glenn, because there's top quality players and a top quality coach. So it's something more than that. Things just aren't coming together. And Ronnie Dyla couldn't achieve anything. And we know what a great job he did at NYCFC. So 2 very good coaches, a squad of very good players, and it's not working. So it's something more than just that as well.
Guess who's chiming in here? So for when we get here, Tom Williams, one of our mates, he's you've heard him on Apple, and any Fernandez Mercado movement. So that's going back to New York City for a moment. We don't have anything, I think, concrete about that. There's a lot of discussion about the couple of Portuguese sides. And Matty, I think you said it quite clearly when this came up, on our group chat. And then when we got together and chatted about it, it's all about the money. I mean,
yes.
He'll move if the money's right, correct?
Yeah, every single football club in the world is a selling club if the money is right. And NYCFC are just one of the clubs in the world that if the money is right, if they double or treble the money that they spent, if Porto or Benfica, as we're led to believe, if they offer up $25 million, Glenn, then he's going on his way, isn't he? He's a player that NYCFC can't afford to lose, but it's more than football, isn't it? Football is also a business, and the powers that be, you would have thought, will start to chime in if there's some big money laid forward. And of course, Fernandez Macau himself as a player will learn through his agent and through other people, will learn of the interest too. And you couldn't turn down the opportunity if you're Fernandez Macau of going to 2 of the biggest clubs in Europe, really. Benfica and Porto are huge clubs. If we're led to believe, if it is them.
He did decide to leave Elche. And
he did.
As they were promoted to La Liga, the chance to play against Real Madrid and Barcelona, and Atletico Madrid. And those are the kinds of things, if he does well in those matches, might even give him more impetus to go somewhere at a higher wage, maybe.
The difference with Elche is Elche, a yo-yo team. They're always a team that if you look at the La Liga now, they're in the bottom 3. They're likely to go back down. But yes, we made the point, and I certainly made the point, that for NYCFC to get him from Elche after such a good season and to stop him playing at Camp Nou and the Bernabeu, they're going to have to pay big money. And look, we saw they did. They paid big money for the transfer fee and then huge money for wages. So Elche possibly couldn't have matched that. I have no idea, but you would have thought that earning $3.6 million, I wouldn't have thought there's too many, if any, Elche players earning that. So he came to play in the top league in the States, but also he came for the notoriety of being within the City Football Group. And he knew that if he plays well here, others will take notice. And people took notice at Elche, and now people are taking notice at NYCFC. But he's certainly, of course, the point is you would not want to lose him. He's a DP. He's a DP because he gets paid the big money, and he's also producing DP quality play as well, Glenn. So you wouldn't want to lose him. But when the money comes calling, he will be on his way, the same as anybody else would.
Yep. Yeah, we were talking about the Chicago Fire. Their sporting director is Greg Broughton. Drew Broughton has been a guest of mine on the Sirius XMFC show, former pro player and now more involved in mental performance. But Greg is Blackburn Rovers, Bodo Glimt, Norwich. So he's got some real experience. Luton Town, Wickham Wanderers. I mean, you're old. Yeah. Sorry, they're so far down there, Matty, and even though you played for them, I can't never pronounce it correctly. So the correct pronunciation is Wycombe?
Wickham Wanderers. You did pronounce it right.
Wickham, yeah.
Wickham Wanderers.
I thought you corrected me. Oh, okay.
No, I didn't know. No, you're right, Glenn. You're spot on. You're always right.
Thank you. Well, look.
Well, I have to say you're always right anyway.
Yeah, you do. I guess I'm your boss, sort of.
I know, exactly. You can suddenly lose me from half the screen.
Well, that's true. I could just do this. See you. But I'll bring you back.
Thank you.
Greg Broughton, follow him on LinkedIn. We share things sometimes, and he put this up, which was, so this is a list, Matty, of young footballers in MLS, 21 or younger, I believe. Well, these are all U22 initiative players, to be very specific. And for instance, Augustine Ojeda for New York City's on here. Yeah. And the idea is the number of minutes now being given to young players in MLS. And there seems to be a little bit more fervor in that area, even if they aren't U22. But what Greg Broughton is suggesting is that the U22 initiative program that MLS has instilled, where you don't have to take as big a salary cap hit when you sign these players, that it's working. And you see Chris Brady on there for Chicago, and then Bokazi, who we talked about earlier, for Chicago, they're back. And Nico Shakiris, who is having a great year for San Jose, had 2 assists in their win over the weekend when they beat Sporting KC. Julian Hall, who assisted on both goals. He's 18-year-old for the Red Bulls in their 2-2 draw at Miami at this new stadium. So it's I thought it was interesting just to take a brief look at that. And and everybody seems to, I think people observing the game, whether they're pundits or coaches or other players or just supporters, we're always intrigued with how the young players perform.
Yes, absolutely we are. And the potential that there is in the league is continuing to grow and grow. The opportunities are arising at younger ages. Matty certainly is getting some valuable minutes. Julian Hall, who almost seems to be an old timer, an old stager at New York Red Bulls.
Well, here's what he's 18 years of age. Beginning of the year, he and Mehmeti combined on a goal. Hall was 17 and Mehmeti was 16 at the time. Yeah. Well, now Hall has turned 18 in the meantime, and Mehmeti has turned 17. So they have grown.
Exactly. They're aging. And another interesting thing to see is that it's a young centre half was top of that minutes list. Yeah. It's Harrington, the young boy, the centre half at Colorado Rapids, the Aussie. I think he's only 18 years of age. So it's great to see youngsters getting opportunities in those positions as well. Because those positions, it's hard to develop and it's hard to be a good centre half at an early age. Just because of sheer experience or lack thereof. And especially in MLS, the big money is normally spent up top. So you're playing against very, very good opposition. You're playing against the best players of each team are normally the centre forwards or the number 10. So yes, that makes it even harder for defenders.
So Julian Hall, he assisted on the tying goal by Adri Mehmeti at Miami. So there's some precociousness within that duo for sure, because they've combined throughout the year, and they could consistently remain in the starting 11 for Michael Bradley. All right, on to just briefly the U.S. Open Cup. So there are 16 MLS teams who are put into the round of 32. That's where they start, and that's where New York City will start. And they're going to be at Westchester. And Jonathan Jimenez, a former New York City FC2 player, is at Westchester. So that game is tomorrow night. And as I mentioned earlier, Pascal Janssen is going to have a pregame press conference a little later on today. And I'll share some things from that if there's anything worthy a little bit later on. But the biggest thing here, now we start trying to figure out and getting in Pascal and his coaching team's heads what they're going to do with this is in terms of players. You know, you're coming off the Vancouver trip, the long flight back, that whole thing.
I think you've said it there. Certainly, you've alluded to it. I don't think there'll be any first team starters, or certainly not from the weekend, will play in that game. We have to look a little bit further forward as well. That isn't it. Next week there's 3 games as well. There's Wednesday weekend.
Right.
So there's no way, in my opinion, any of the starters are going to play. But it gives a chance for the likes of Carrizo, Johnny Shaw, Malachi Jones, you would assume, to get a number of minutes. Seymour Reed, of course. Drew Baera would have started if, unfortunately, he hadn't had that ACL injury. So this will be minutes for younger players. You would imagine it will be a very, very young starting lineup. Does somebody like Tanasiewicz play?
Right.
I think you would expect he has to, because you have to get minutes. It's very, very hard to play well when you come off the bench if you've not had any minutes of competitive football. So, yes, the starting lineup won't play. None of them will play. I would almost guarantee it. But, yes, people like Tanasiewicz, Malachi Jones, of course. Whether Malachi Jones starts, I don't know the fitness levels of him. He may just play a half. He may start and come off at half-time, or he may come on at half-time. It depends how the medical staff want to play it. But, yes, it will be a reserve team.
This Arnau Farnos, who has been a short-term agreement twice now, coming from the 2 team, you would expect he would play along with some of the other 2 team that haven't gotten the chance. Max Murray would, but he is injured as well. So there are limitations. As always, it's kind of fascinating to see how everybody handles these particular games, because the thing is, Matty, if both New York City and the Red Bulls advance out of the round of 32, they meet in the next round. So is that in mind at all, where you get a chance to? No. Okay.
No. There's absolutely no way in the world that Pascal Janssen is worrying about who they may play in the next round, or that they could be playing the Red Bulls. All that is on his mind is he wants to win the game. He wants to win the game, but he wants to protect all of his players as well. So that's a little bit of a contradiction, because if you truly want to win the game, you put out your best players, but you also don't want them after the west to east trip, the playing on AstroTurf. You don't want to risk any of those starters, and he won't. I would almost guarantee it, Glenn. I'll bet your mortgage on it, Glenn.
My mortgage is paid off, so you're gonna have to come up with something else.
Well, just the whole house then.
Just to confirm, it's New York will host Charlotte on next Saturday, or this coming Saturday rather, and then the following Wednesday at home to Cincinnati, and then off to Montreal that departed with Marco Donadel, and the disaster that is CF Montreal under that ownership just continues to show itself. Laurent Courtois, they sacked him after 5 games last year.
Yeah, it's such a shame, especially when you see what Saputo's other side, Bologna, are doing in Serie A and doing in Europe, in European competition. They're playing very well. They've got a great squad. They've got a pretty strong squad because they're dealing with playing in Europe as well. And Montreal is just so much the lesser of the teams, Glenn. And it's really sad because...
Well, they don't sign anybody.
They don't sign anybody. They don't spend any money, and you get what you pay for. And it's very, very hard to breed team continuity when there is no continuity. There is no continuity because the manager changes every few months, it seems. So, yes, it's a shame because I love going up to Montreal. I love Montreal as a city, but I also love watching games of football at Montreal because normally the atmosphere is fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great
it's
stadium.
A wonderful crowd. It's a
really good soccer community too.
Exactly. It's a European
hockey going north of the border, but soccer in Montreal, it's a very diverse community.
Yes.
A lot of Italian population, French population. It's you feel like you're in Europe when you're in Montreal.
You do. It's well supported even when they're doing badly, because most of the time they are doing badly. But still, 20,000 people turn up there, and it's quite a fervent support. We love it, Glenn. It's always a terrific atmosphere up there. So yes, it's a shame to see that it's not supported. The club's not supported from further afield, being the ownership group. But again, they're the owners. They can do what they want. It's up to them. You can't castigate them too much because it's their money.
How the team is guided, though, there is something to the coaching side. I remember the last time they were good, it was Wilfried Nancy.
Yes.
And so where does he end up, Matty? I mean, he's gone into a dark place are the wrong two words, but he has gone dark where we don't really hear much about him, or there are no, normally we hear about names being mentioned for positions, but his name hasn't come up yet.
Yeah, look, he'll be licking his wounds, and we don't know how his payoff worked. Sometimes you need to stay on gardening leave for a number of months to get your full payout. Quite often, if you take another job, you stop being paid by Celtic because Celtic won't have just given him a lump sum, I'm sure. So we don't know those goings on, Glenn. But yes, look, Wilfried Nancy will be licking his wounds and he'll want to get back in the saddle, I would have thought. Sooner rather than later. But does he want to revisit somewhere he's already been in Montreal, go to a club that doesn't spend a great deal of money? Who only he will know that. But I want to see Wilfried Nancy back, Glenn. Whether that's at MLS, whether that's in Ligue 1, whether that's elsewhere, I don't mind. But I like him as a coach, obviously, but I like him as a human being as well. He always comes across very well, talks wonderfully well about the game. And he got dealt a very bad hand at Celtic. It's not on his head there. Martin O'Neill went in as interim manager, who's an absolute god. I know what the word god means. Martin O'Neill is a god at Celtic Park and at Celtic Football Club. So for poor Wilfried Nancy to come in as the main manager after the interim spell had gone so well with Martin O'Neill, yes, he was fed to the lions, so to speak, and he got eaten alive.
The most interesting thing I heard about Wilfried, and it's not from him, but it was from a friend of his who knows him very well, said because the discussion was, why would you go to Celtic at that time, replacing Martin O'Neill, wanting to wait till the end of their campaign if they had that interest in you still? And it was like, well, that's the way Wilfried, that's the way he operates. The challenge of it all. He wanted to go in. He wanted to go in and just almost give it a shot his way, because that's the challenge that he wanted to accept. So I thought that was interesting, that it was like, that attracted him to the job rather than detracted.
Yeah, and you've got to have confidence in your ability, haven't you? And there's no way, also as a manager, you're going to say to the ownership group, Dermot Desmond, I think it is, at Celtic, there's no way you're going to say, oh, I'll come, but I'm not going to come till the end of the season when things are quieting down and Martin O'Neill's not doing quite so well. That's just not going to happen. He had to take the job. It's a huge job. It's one of the biggest jobs in Europe. I know Celtic don't perform well in European competitions, but up there in Glasgow, it is a matter of life and death. It truly is. And unfortunately, sometimes that goes a little bit too far. It does truly become a matter of life and death. And yes, the supporters, at Wilfried Nancy alive.
All right, we're going to get to the Premier League. Tati Castellanos, the New York City Football Club, made some cash off the transfer of Tati a couple of times over, and now he's at West Ham, and that's him celebrating as he had a brace as West Ham beat Wolves. And they are above the relegation zone now, and remain there because Spurs lose again, even under new leadership. De Zerbi is there now, and look, there's no magic wand there. I'm going to go right to Arsenal, Matty, and because this is the intrigue of the week is going to be Arsenal against Manchester City on Saturday. Arsenal loses at home to Bournemouth, and a former New York City midfielder, Andoni Iraola, who's having great success at Bournemouth as the manager there. They're unbeaten in 13 now after that result. Tyler Adams returns. That's good news for the U.S. men's national team. But Arsenal. So as promised, so let me get to this first, and then we'll close with your thoughts also. So I contacted Dan Abrahams, a renowned sports psychologist who has worked in the Premier League, has worked with Arne Slot, who is now with the beloved Liverpool, but he worked with Slot when he was at Feyenoord, did Dan. And I wanted to contact him about a couple of things, but one was Arsenal, what they're going through. And what I directly asked Dan from a sports psychology standpoint, what would you do if you were inserted into the fray on Monday morning to get them ready for this game and the possibility of what would be one of the more monumental collapses in Premier League history. So here was Dan's response.
What would I do now? One thing I would propose is that we hold an appreciative inquiry. What an appreciative inquiry is, getting everybody in the room and talking about us at our best. When we're at our best, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What do others see? What's strong? What works? Let's start getting the language of the organization aligned in a simple manner that relates to strengths and what's working and what we do when we're at our best. Success leaves clues, that old adage. So let's start aligning our language, our behaviors there and make that a process. And what I've done in the past, for example, I did this with Arne Slot at Feyenoord, the team he was head coach at before he went to Liverpool, is just breaking it down into action-based words. Action-based words, I'm sure you've heard me say this before, Glenn, on your show, are some of the most powerful instruments and tools that you can have at your disposal. They are great descriptors of actions, and they're great triggers for the way we want to execute our actions and how we want to support ourselves. I'll give you a working example. It would be highly likely that I'd stand in a room with the Arsenal players and the Arsenal staff, and they'd break it down to action-based words like dominant, upbeat, relentless, cool, calm, focused, those athletic, sharp, alert, alive, lively, those kind of action-based words. And again, what you know is when players and coaches come up with these words, you're evoking pictures in their mind that drive feelings of, well, I suppose, success in many respects. And so breaking it down into 3 action-based words, and then when we go and play Manchester City, we're going to stick to these 3 words. What do we do when we go play Manchester City on the 18th of April? We're going to execute in the style of these 3 words. So let's imagine they came up with confident, brave, and dominant. Confident, brave, and dominant. Let's just imagine that. Our job against Manchester City isn't necessarily, we know we want to win. We know we want to high perform. What are we going to do, though, to give that our best try, our best effort, to make that our reality? We're going to be dominant, confident, brave, dominant, confident, brave. We're going to support each other to be dominant, confident, brave. With every action, every run, every movement, we're going to be dominant, confident, brave. We're stripping it back to actions, descriptors of actions, and then we're going to go and embody that.
So that's what on the sports psychology side, the 3 action words, and he utilized that. He talked about with Slot, and we didn't quite get to Liverpool in our discussion because that would be another one to look at closely. Winning it all a year ago, and then all these different issues that have happened with Slot this year. But and I wonder if Slot refers to some of the things that he learned from Dan. But pretty interesting, Matty, because I would imagine some players you've played with over the years would hear something like that and go, come on, man.
Yes. Yeah, they would. Part of that is where or the time I grew up as a footballer. It was, over a decade ago now that I retired. So 20, 25, 30 years ago when I started playing professional football. So yes, some things like psychology and even nutrition to a certain degree, some players look down their nose to it, especially players when I first started, when I was 22, 23, and players who were older, they were born in 1960 and earlier than that. Then of course they would sneer down their nose at some of this stuff. But the point is that if you lose many games, you still, whether you agree with the words that Dan Abrahams uses or not, you still want to remind yourselves what got you to where you were.
Right.
Whether that's how you trained, whether that's the set pieces that you were so good at, you want to get back to basics and get back to where you were. And also you want to try and alleviate any of the pressure. You want to forget about the fact that you've choked in previous years. You don't talk about that. You certainly don't talk. You wouldn't have thought about anything further than Manchester City. Because it's a must not lose game for Arsenal as well. Arsenal don't need to win the game either.
Right.
Yeah, I know they're not going to go into it sitting back and trying to soak up pressure because it's very hard to do that against Manchester City. Yes, they've got to play on the front foot.
So we talked about Rory McIlroy, who had the largest second round league, 6 strokes in at the Masters. and then gave up that lead on the third day, and it actually trailed at a point on the fourth day before he came back and won it. And some of the things he said, these are quotes, I can get real caught up in the outcome. So he's very much, and we've heard this from coaches, process versus the result, because when you get caught up in the outcome, that's when the nerves become more elevated. And he also said, find enjoyment in the journey. And then the way I tied this into Artemis 2 and the astronauts was an astronaut named Chris Hadfield, who was not on this journey, but he wrote a book. And one of the chapters, I found this so interesting, and I go in depth with Dan on this, which will be an interview that airs on Sirius XM-FC on Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. One of his chapters is The Power of Negative Thinking. That was the name of the chapter. But what he said is, it's a result of a lifetime spent visualizing defeat to figure out how to prevent it. And how else did he put it? He said, I want to make sure I have some of this correct, because I thought it was really powerful that you're just trying to prepare yourself for the worst case scenario. For the astronaut, this is in his chapter, for the astronaut, it's if somebody that you're with in space passes away. I mean, that's like the worst thing. Yeah. That's probably not going to happen on the soccer field. It'd be very rare, and it has happened. But you're preparing yourself for worst case scenarios. So that makes sense to me too. You know, I don't like the word negative so much, but that's what you're doing. That's what Rory McIlroy did in his ability to come back and win the Masters. I wonder if that's something that Arsenal could latch on to. Just look at all the worst case scenario could be going down a goal in the second minute to Man City, right?
Yeah, it can. And how you're going to deal with that. I think Arsenal will want to be just as positive as possible. And as I say, just remember why you are where you are, why you've been so dominant this season. But also, prepare to fail at times as well, I guess. But we'll see what happens as well, Glenn. I listened to Gary Neville this morning on Sky Sports, and Gary Neville, he said that he thinks that Arsenal are going to stumble over the line. It's not going to be pretty, but he thinks they'll get there. I'm not so sure. And the game, obviously, at the weekend, it's not quite the decider, but it's not far off.
Yeah, and it's going to be played at the Etihad. Do you think that that seems to be the possibility of being impactful? But maybe that works in Arsenal's favor.
I was just
look
about
at the psychology side of it. You don't have the pressure of the supporters all of a sudden turning on you if you do go down a goal.
Yeah, and the supporters will turn very, very quickly when you're at home and when you're expected to win. They would have done against Bournemouth, that's for certain. I think there's something to be said about having the freedom of playing away from home. I really do. Look, hindsight's 2020. We can talk about it next Monday or next Tuesday, and we'll find out the result. But I do think it could be beneficial for them to be playing away from home.
All right. Well, that'll be fun to look at. And we want to thank everybody for joining us this week, episode 4 of NYCFC Coffee Break. Myself and Matty Lawrence, your New York City FC English radio commentators. And we've got another game coming up on Saturday when New York City plays host to Charlotte. It's at Citi Field. And we'll be on with our NYCFC pregame live. It looks very much like this, except we'll be at Citi Field. And we'll preview some of the different things in that game. And that'll be after New York City plays whatever lineup they go with on Tuesday for this U.S. Open Cup match at Westchester. So, Matty, good stuff. And look forward to next week, because there's a lot that's going to happen that including Champions League football. So we might have to dig into that a little bit too.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about next week. That's for certain.
All right. For Matty Lawrence, I'm Glenn Crooks. And thanks for being here. And we'll talk to you again soon.